your digital presence. For those who are new to this platform, Mastermind Family is a noble creation by our mentor, Dr. Thomas George, the founder and chairman of one of the best management institutes in South India, the Lead College of Management, Palakkad. He is one of the most sought after trainers and also a Guinness record holder for longest business speech. This group was formed on April 22nd, 2020. Until today, we were meeting every day at 9 p.m. on this Zoom platform. We conduct talks of experts and trainers on various topics and disciplines and have live discussion and interactions on every day. We have people from all ages, professions, and geographies in this group. This group's sole objective is to learn, share, and grow. If anyone wants to be part of this beautiful and exciting journey, we welcome you. Just join our WhatsApp group and you are in. We'll be sharing the details in the chat box. Dear masterminds, this is the digital era. As we increasingly live in this digital world, securing your online presence is very important. No matter how you spend your time online, chances are there you are living bits of yourself all over the place. So you risk being the victim of bad guys online who may use your information for their advantage. Now, hacking data is a big business for criminals, and getting hacked has become the new normal for businesses and consumers. Cyber criminals are getting their hands on a variety of data from names to security numbers, bank or credit card passwords, addresses, phone numbers, health records, and more. If this is the new normal, it is important to understand where are we now and what businesses and consumers can do to protect their digital presence. Surely, making your online identity and activities more secure is the need of the hour. Dear masterminds, so today we have a very relevant topic of how to secure your online presence. And our today's speaker is none other than Mr. Arun Pangsali, whose company Nearex Technologies is actually working on breakthrough cashless payment technology for small payments. He is the co-founder and chief technology officer of Nearex, a fintech company building solutions for micropayments. He has a long experience in telecom and IT industries for around 30 years. He was earlier CTO of Mahindra Comviva, and before that, the co-founder of and CTO of Jadayu Software. He and his team's products have won many awards over the years for innovation and excellence. Products designed and developed by his teams in India have reached over 100 million users globally. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege and honor to welcome Mr. Arun Pangsali, an expert in digital payment technologies and an entrepreneur of par excellence, to this beautiful platform of masterminds. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Arun.
Thank you, Mr. Suresh. It was a wonderful introduction. Thank you for that. And thanks to...
So now you can share the screen.
Sure, I will do that. And thanks, Sylvie, for introducing me to this wonderful mastermind group. Like Mr. Suresh mentioned, securing a digital presence today is not just an option that we can exercise, but has become a necessary part of our life. I will try in the next 20 minutes to give you a sense of what we can do to protect ourselves online. Many of you here are probably from the IT industry and may be familiar with many of these things, but hopefully you'll find some things here which are different than what you already would be knowing. And for those who are not from the IT industry, hopefully there will be enough takeaway that you can help improve your own personal security online. So today, as you are aware, everything is online. Today's meeting, for example, is online. Studies, work, every single thing is going online. And hence, making sure that we are protected as we go and do more and more things online is the need of the hour. But before we protect ourselves, we need to understand what we are trying to protect ourselves against. So, a few years ago, it used to be really viruses. I'm sure many of you would remember a few years ago, whether you had a McAfee virus or a Symantec or a Kaspersky or one of the antivirus solutions, or QuickHeal from India installed on your laptop. And in most cases, if you had a right antivirus and updated virus signatures, you're pretty much safe. And we only used to worry about the bad physical harm coming from people in real world, not virtually. I think things have changed over the last few years, and particularly in the last few months, I think it's completely turned upside down. We worry about viruses on the streets and in the real world, and on online platforms, we need to worry about the bad elements, the bad people who can potentially harm us. So it's not just notional. Many of us tend to feel and believe that we do not have information which may be of interest to external people. Maybe financial information is important, but the payments themselves, I'll come to that in a short while. That's really not the crux of the problem. We need to start securing ourselves much earlier. When I talk about the kind of things bad people do or what hackers do in general, let's have a look at the kind of companies that get affected. These are companies or names which many of you would be familiar with. You'd have probably stayed at a Marriott hotel or a Starwood, used Under Armour fitness products, booked a Uber ride, or have a LinkedIn profile. Many of the people or most of the people here are professional. There's probably a LinkedIn profile. Ordered food on Zomato and so on, right? Or taken insurance from Religare. What kind of links all of these names and hundreds more outside which are not listed is that all of these companies have lost a lot of customer data in recent years, right? A large amount of data. Marriott has lost, it was a few years ago, but they had lost nearly 500 million users' data, all the people who had stayed at their properties, their hotels around the world. So that included names and email addresses, and including payment card information. Uber is obvious. Many of us would have used that for rides. And a couple of years ago, 57 million riders' data was lost. LinkedIn, 117 million, Zomato, a big number. And it's not just in the past, it's not historical things. These are happening even today. Just last month, 2 months ago in July, Dunzo, there were 3.5 million users' data which was leaked out. And Religare, which is a pretty large insurance player in India, just 2 months ago, in fact, exactly 2 months ago today, they lost data for about 5 million users. Right. So what does this mean? What does losing data mean for these companies? And more importantly, what does it mean for us as individuals, as private citizens? So what happens when a leak happens or when a data breach happens, which is what's the usual term used, is that your email ID is most certainly the email ID, that's your primary identifier in many of these systems. It would be available to the people who hacked the systems, the spammers or the hackers. Right? Most likely your name, because you'd have given your full name as part of the data. Maybe your phone number. In some cases, maybe the older ones, password protection has become slightly more better in recent years. Some cases, they may have got your passwords as well. And in some cases, they may have more information, like in the Religare insurance breach I was talking about. They have got date of birth, names of family members, even potential illnesses that individuals may have had, which would have got disclosed as part of purchasing an insurance. These are extremely critical pieces of information, and these can cause you harm if they fall into the wrong hands. So what might happen if someone gets hold of this data? And remember, this is not something which you are doing. These are all data breaches happening at large organizations where you're just a user, but still the impact of this could actually come onto you. So the first thing you might notice is that if your email ID is part of one of these spam databases, or what the hackers have obtained, then you will start seeing spam emails, which many times they look obviously unlikely that you would be the right recipient. You would probably ignore them, and or your email system would put them into the spam folder, and you would get rid of it at a later point. But with increasing sophistication and the ability of hackers to connect all those different data, if you as a user had a LinkedIn account, had an Uber account, were ordering food on Zomato, then there's a profile that hackers have built of you. So they know that they can use this to their advantage. So imagine if a mail comes with dear Pradeep and reaches your inbox, it will cause you a little bit more pause and make you at least look at the email and wonder if it might be a real email, right? Particularly if it looked realistic enough. But if you look at the next point there, suppose they had obtained data from Zomato. So they send you an email, they address you by your name, and they also say that, based on your last Zomato order, here is a link to obtain additional discount. It would look realistic enough. You are a Zomato customer, they're addressing you by name, but yet it could potentially have been from someone else. And these are the kind of things which you might start encountering as your credentials or your identity gets stolen from these different organizations. In particular, and we will get into a little bit more of this, if you have the same password that was in one of these breached data sets, then your accounts in all other services where you have the same password is completely up for grabs. Potentially people can log in and take away your information and keep building profiles and then use it further. So how do you start combating this? What do you do to overcome this, this situation? But before we get into actual steps, I want to just highlight a few differences that apply to securing yourself online versus the physical world. These are important to understand because those play a role in how you actually handle online security. I think the first and most important thing is that protecting physical things which are visible to us, is something which we know instinctively. We don't really know, we don't need to be taught how to do that. We kind of been handed over that information. If I ask you to protect your laptop physically, it shouldn't get stolen. You know exactly how to do it because the techniques that you'll use are exactly the same ones that your parents, your grandparents, and forefathers have been using for generations together. They're really no different today than what they were maybe 100 years ago. But when it comes to information that's invisible, then, or hackers who are not visible to you, how do you really protect yourself? So the visibility versus invisibility plays a big role. Related to that is the handed down knowledge. As a young kid, your parents tell you, do this, don't do this, this is dangerous, don't touch this. Or conversely, this is important, don't let others touch something that you have. So these are things which are taught and acquired when you're very young. So they become kind of inborn in sense that they're part of your subconscious. You don't need to really think too much about protecting yourself in the physical world. Instinctive versus learned is very similar. You have acquired that gut feel which protects you without having to really take conscious steps every single time you encounter a physical threat. If you spot someone who you think might be suspicious, you will move your physical goods away. Let's say you're in an airport, you're sitting with a bag, someone comes past, you would move it around just because you think, you know, there could be a potential threat, because you're seeing the threat, you're holding you're seeing the physical object which might be under threat, and so on. And perhaps the last thing which distinguishes physical security from online is that when somebody steals data, your data doesn't go away. You still have it, and which makes it very tough to know when data has been actually taken away. In a physical object, if somebody takes it away, you know, there's a gap, and you can easily know that someone has taken away. But in the online world, when someone takes away your data, you still end up having that as well, and which makes it very tough to be alert to when data has gone away. There are other similarities. I'll skip past that, but you know, you will realize that as we go along. So, you know, given these differences, and the reason why I highlight these is because it needs a conscious effort from each of us to take care of ourselves online. We haven't yet acquired the instinct that we need. All of this is very new. Our parents haven't taught us how to be safe online, because when we were young kids, well, most of us here, there was no internet available to them. So these are all things which we have learned firsthand. These are our kids, when they are now doing things, you know, we tell them, do this or don't do this, and they will start acquiring those instincts. So they'll be much better at protecting themselves. But talking about ourselves, you know, the generation who got used to internet pretty much for the first time, the instincts haven't got built up yet, and hence every single thing has to be a conscious step. So that's just the background. Now we'll talk about specific steps that you could do, and some of them are pretty straightforward, and particularly those from the IT industry, you'll recognize them as something which you would probably do in routine as part of your normal work. But one thing I found is that, like, you know, like the old adage that doctors are the ones who take the least care of themselves. You know, they don't necessarily go and get checkups periodically like everybody else should. The IT people themselves are also lax at their own personal security. So hopefully these things will help you remind yourself of what you need to do. One thing which you need to keep in mind is security and convenience are really two different things. They pull you in two different directions. More security you want to have, you need to sacrifice a little amount of convenience. If you want everything to be simple, convenient, you know, you don't want to lock on your door, you can walk in anytime. Obviously, you are giving up security. But if you put that lock, maybe multiple locks, then you need to open multiple locks every single time you want to get in. So security and convenience are trade-offs, and that's something which is true even in the online world. So let's jump in and see which are the few things you need to do. These are all pretty straightforward, basic things. And I'll start with something which is the absolute simplest thing, which all of you can do, because in most cases, this can be set up for automatic updates, but yet there are a lot of people who don't do this. So this is the absolute baseline. If you aren't doing this, this is the first thing you should do. Don't worry too much about viruses, worms, or Trojans. As long as your OS is updated, if your Windows or Android OS is updated or your Mac is updated, then you're largely protected from much of these types of security issues. Keep applications updated as well, not just the OS. In many cases, you know, when I talk to people, they say that their phone is doing just fine. Why do they need to update it? It works well, right? They don't need the new features. In fact, it might do something which changes its behavior, and they will need to spend some time getting familiar all over again. Don't do that. The primary reason why you should update your OS, your applications regularly, is because you get security updates that way. The features are completely secondary. The primary reason why you need to update your OS and applications because you get security updates that way, right? I would suggest that you should not spend more than a month without updating your applications. OS is a little bit, you know, depends on the OS manufacturer, Microsoft or Google or Samsung or whoever, but applications are generally available for updates much more often, and you should definitely update them. At least once a month, you should go and manually check it, but I would suggest you set up for automatic update on both your Windows, Android, iOS, macOS, wherever. Do it for automatic updates. You will be largely free of worries about viruses, worms, or Trojans, or that kind of activity. A related thing which I just want to highlight is that nowadays it's really not that necessary to have a third-party antivirus tool, McAfee or Symantec or Kaspersky or whatever. The default protection that the OS offers is usually good enough as long as you keep it updated. If you don't keep it updated, your antivirus really won't really help you in that sense. So getting past that, the basics there, look at passwords, right? So the best way to look at passwords is to think of the analogy of the number of different keys that you carry. Right? Imagine if you had exactly one key which opens up everything that you do, whether it's a car or a house or your office or your bank safe deposit locker. It can't really be the same key. You use different keys in real life, and yet a lot of people tend to use the same password across multiple sites. So the way to do things is to actually use a completely different password on every new site. Right. Obviously, you will be using dozens or maybe hundreds of sites, and you are not. I mean, nobody can remember hundreds of different passwords and which password is on which site, particularly if they are a little complex. So the way to do that is to use password managers, right? And I'll talk about a few that are popular, but the one which I use personally is called Bitwarden. Right, Bitwarden, I'll try and show you how that looks. Right, so this is Bitwarden, right? So it's a plugin into Chrome and Firefox and Android and everything else, right? So, for example, if you see here, I presume you're still seeing the screen, right? It says that I have 312 different logins, and all 312 of them actually have a different password. And that way, if someone breaches one of these accounts that I have, the password that they get is actually not very useful because that password is not being used anywhere else. And the way this works is by using a password generator. In fact, I would recommend using a passphrase, and that's what I usually use. So on most sites, I use a password like this, right? So you generate a password, pick one and use that. You don't have to remember that. I think that's the whole point of password managers, that you don't have to remember these passwords. So whether it's a passphrase or a password, just use something like this, don't remember, and save it in the password manager. And that way, you don't have to start worrying about which password is on which site, and all you need to do is remember the one password for your password manager, which is held locally on your device, whether it's a laptop or mobile phone. And then you are free from having to remember all the different passwords. And you're also absolutely secure because the same password doesn't go on all these different websites. Another thing which you need to do, remember I was talking about all of these different data breaches. There's a site which actually tells you whether your email ID has been found in one of these data breaches. And I would urge you to go and do that today. The site, if you can see it, is monitor.firefox.com. And let me show you from my own account, what is the case. Right, so this is the breach report for my email ID. Right, so I'm monitoring this one email ID on this account. It's been exposed, my email ID has been exposed in 14 different companies' data. Right? And it's something which you can go and do it, Firefox, monitor.firefox.com, and you will immediately know how safe your email ID is. Look at the second number here, 10. The password has been exposed in 10 different data breaches. Right, but I'm relatively safe because the same password doesn't get used on other websites. And I've been using this Bitwarden tool for years. So let's see some of these data breaches. And like I was talking about Denso. So what did I lose in that? I lost my phone number. In a Zoom car, which is a car rental, I lost passwords in that one. PropTiger, which is a property site, passwords there. There's another service. You will see many of them. Zynga was a game site. Canva was an email address and password. This is a very popular design site. So if you are using any of this, Kickstarter, Zomato, even Dropbox, LinkedIn, you will find that what of these data breaches have resulted in your email ID getting compromised. If it is compromised, you should definitely go and have a look at changing your password. In fact, if that password is being used anywhere else, you should go and change all of them right after this session, in fact. And the best thing about Firefox, this monitor.firefox.com, is you can register your email ID, and anytime your email ID is found in another data breach, you'll get an alert, which means that as soon as someone hacks into some of the company's data, but of which you are a user, and they get your email ID or any of the detail, then you'll get an alert and you can actually go and take immediate action. So for passwords, don't use the same password. Use a password manager that will simplify how to remember all of those things, and use monitor.firefox.com for managing, for finding out where it's been breached. Then the second thing which you need to protect is your email. I mean, why email? It's because email is how you identify yourself on many sites, whether it's on LinkedIn or Dropbox or even Facebook or many other places. Your email ID is your identity. And if you forget the password there, email is what you receive to reset that password back again. So email is kind of your central entity where all of your other accounts get managed. Hence, you need to be particularly careful about that. And a lot of the recent attempts to get people's data and to do some damage to them happens mostly via email. So along with email, along with these different passwords, I would suggest using something called two-factor authentication. If you've not heard about it, I would suggest turning it on through Google. For Gmail, I got a small screen here, if you can see. In the Gmail settings, there's something called two-step verification. You turn that on. There are various modes of doing it. Every time you log in, or after a few days, every 30 days or 45 days, it can send you an SMS to make sure you're the right person logging in. And there's something called Authy, which is a very popular tool for second factor authentication. And it generates a code like this, like you see here, the 597202. This needs to be entered back on various sites, including Gmail, which supports that, which means that along with your email ID and password, you need this additional parameter to log in, which means that no one else, even if they get your email password, can log into your site. I'm going to do a quick exercise on something called phishing. You may have heard of this term, right? It's where people try to make you do things which you don't want, which you shouldn't be doing, right? So I'm using a quick set of things. If you see this on your screen, there's a 6 numbered things here. They all are supposed to represent Amazon.com links, right? These are, I've made it very simple. If you see the bottom ones, the 5 and 6, this is how usually you would get an email, get your free offer by clicking, and there's some link, and you need to hover on that to see the details. For your convenience, I'll put that thing at the bottom here. So I just pause here for about 15 seconds. Out of the 6, which one of them do you think represent a valid Amazon.com link? There's a mix of valid and invalid. So do take a look for for 10 seconds while I pause. Right. They all look very similar, and I think that's if you had a look at that, I can give you the answer. It's actually only one which is valid. That's the very first one. If you see the others, they all have some small differences in them. Like this has an O instead of A, this has an M, this actually has a IN, which kind of looks like an M if you're not paying attention. And in this case, it's actually a completely different URL. Though it says Amazon.com, it's actually completely different. Even here. So it's only one URL which is actually valid in this whole thing. Everything else is bad. And yet you will get plenty of mails where if you don't pay attention, you could click on a wrong link and go to a different site and enter your password, and the wrong guys have now got your Amazon password, and they could potentially order things on your behalf, right? So you get Google, Gmail, and others. They provide alerts like this, which say that this is is a potential phishing attempt and so on. Pay attention to those. I'll come to a little bit of more details on how you can detect these in a subsequent slide. On mobile, again, generally keeping apps and OS updated will protect you considerably. There's one thing which you need to do when installing apps, and that is look for what permissions they ask you. Permissions are these kind of, the prompts that come up and say, allow this particular application to take pictures, allow the access to your contacts, and so on. Now, each of these permissions have to be used judiciously by an application. If it is it's wrong kind of application, then they could ask for more permissions that they need and have access to more data. Right. For example, a banking application may not need to access the camera, right? Or a SMS application may not need to access a camera or some other parameters. Let's say in this particular case, a Twitter may want to access contacts because they may want to know who else is using the Twitter and then want to share their tweets and so on. So you need to be applying your own judgment on, is this a good app? Is it something which you can trust? Are these permissions which you need to give? In a lot of cases, you may not be able to decide, and then you need to depend upon reviews and the reputation of that particular brand. There's one specific thing that I want to call out on mobile. That's this thing called SIM safety. SIM swap. SIM swap happens when your SIM is lost and you get a replacement SIM with exactly the same number, right? So it's possible that someone else can do exactly the same thing on your behalf. So if they get a SIM which has the exact same number that you have, your SIM stops working and their SIM starts getting activated. And then they can make calls on your behalf. They can get SMSs, OTPs, they can log in. You get pretty much full access to what you would normally have. So in case you start getting unexpected outages for long durations where your phone doesn't connect to the network, or you start getting unexpected OTPs on your phone, you should call your mobile service provider and ask if any attempt has been made to do a SIM swap, and that's an important thing. The government actually has built up some protection that after someone changes a SIM and puts in the number on a new SIM, the SMS is disabled for 24 hours, but that just protects you for 24 hours, not more than that. So if for 24 hours you don't get any OTP or any SMS or anything, then you should call your service provider and see if something has gone wrong. There's a small video which I can, if I have time, I'll just show you how. I think it might take a little long. I'll skip past this, but I will share this link and you can have a look later. Coming specifically to finance and payments, to be honest, this is an area where you as an individual need to worry a little less than almost all the other things that I mentioned. While instinctively we feel that money-related things, are much more difficult and so on. In general, that's true, but it's not when making an online payment that you are least secure. It's mostly when your bank sends you information to your email ID or your phone and you're not able to access that properly. I think that's where you're not able to protect your mobile or your email account properly. That's where things can go bad. In the actual act of making a payment, you're usually in much better shape. In fact, India is probably one of the most safe markets for online payments, both while using cards or the UPI, which has just come in. There are a few things, however, which you should take precautions, and I'll just bring out a few things. First, again, you need to have a different password for banks as against, say, let's say your Facebook or LinkedIn or Dropbox or email. Just make sure they are different. And second, many banks do provide an on-screen keyboard that adds additional layer of security when compared to typing in on your physical keyboard. So use that to the extent possible. A third, and this is a protection against phishing. In most cases, when your bank sends you an email or an SMS with a link in it, don't click on that link, right? Your bank's URL. You should go and actually type that in and go to that website rather than click on a link in an email. Email links, as you saw in the Amazon example, can be very deceptive. They may look very similar, and you click on a link in an email, and it could actually end up taking you to a site which looks like your bank, but is actually not yours. Right. So type in a URL, particularly for those critical services where you definitely want to protect your information. So banks definitely fall in that category. Whether it is a credit card or a debit card, I think there are three things, all three-letter words: PIN, OTP, and CVV. Never share those things. Card number, in many cases, do get saved in partial form or something. And if any of you remember the old, the card swiping machine with the paper, then the card number would be fully printed on that, including expiry date, name and everything else. So in some sense, the system is designed to, payment systems, to let even a full card number be held. Though there are protections against that, but even if a full card number and expiry date and name is there, it can still not be used for transacting unless the CVV is known. So make sure that's the one thing which you should definitely protect, along with PIN and OTP, of course. So PIN, OTP, CVV are the primary three things which we should protect against. On UPI, the UPI is the actual platform on which Google Pay, Phone Pay, Amazon Pay, or Beam in general, they all run. They're actually all interoperable, even though many people don't really know that you can send money from Google Pay to Phone Pay and so on. It's extremely convenient and very handy, but there's one particular threat which is emerging in recent times on that. And that is that UPI actually has a very nice feature for requesting money. Right. So if I am a merchant, I want to collect money from a customer, I could take the customer's UPI ID and actually type it in on my account and say, send a payment request for, let's say, 500 rupees. Then the customer actually gets a link which you can click on and authorize. So this looks very easy. So in many cases, people are actually getting such links and they don't realize that they shouldn't be using that. They click that, it shows 500, they type in a PIN, and money goes away from their account. So receive requests can be potentially problematic. So always make sure that when you get a link that you actually expect to make a payment, and it's not about you receiving money. So there's one, getting into a slightly more general area, and I'm running out of time as far as I can see. So there's one common, convenience hack people do, and which can be a problem. It's sometimes unavoidable, but let's say you are looking for a particular site. Many people don't actually type in the full site name. They actually type in something partial. So let's see an example like this. I'm just getting that particular. So when people want to look for, let's say, a federal bank account, so they type in Google and then look for the result and then click a link here. In this particular case, probably is the right bank you're looking at. But if you look further, there are a few other things. I mean, these are probably other banks in other countries or some other places, but you don't really know if they are they're valid banks. When Google presents your results, it presents a set of what it thinks are most likely. It doesn't know that you're looking for a specific bank and gives you that particular link. And in particular, when there are multiple ads, and I think that's something which you should watch out for, you should actually not be typing in a name, looking for a link, and then typing it in. You should actually type in whatever is like if I want to type in, then I would actually type in a Citibank .co.in, which is my regular bank, rather than just type in Citibank and then look for the particular URL. It goes back to the thing I was mentioning earlier. Bank URLs are best typed rather than hunted and click through the results. In the search, distinguish between ads and results for exactly the same link, same problem. Double check the domain name. I actually have some tips on what you should look for in that. On Wi-Fi, connecting to free Wi-Fi is actually extremely common thing. People seem to, every time they see a free Wi-Fi, they think, okay, here is something which I'm getting for nothing, let me connect to this. And people can actually collect a lot of information for you and actually take out your computer as well. So let me show you a video on this one. It's a 2-minute video. I hope you can see this.
Yes, sir, it's visible. You can play it.
It's coming up, it should be there. It's probably not very visible.
So I am joined here by Mike Sasanskin from Synack. You're going to show us how easy it is to hack into a computer. So this is my personal computer.
So in this attack, we will pretend to be a wireless access point that you normally connect to, let's say in a hotel. So if you go in there and you try to log into something called Four Seasons Guest,
Okay.
as you'd expect, it's, the Wi-Fi is around, you'd want to be able to connect to it, and a person who just arrived will think, I'm a guest, I should connect to the guest network.
Sure.
So now if you go to a website that you normally use, like Yelp.com,
Okay.
and normally what happens
Yeah.
when you go to a website just after you've logged into a hotel network, it says, oh, please log in, you're a new
Sure.
user. So here it's asking for your room number and last name, which it would normally do. Right? And actually I can see your information show up here. And so part of the attack is that it tries to convince you that you need to do an update. Your machine is out of date and it's vulnerable. So you want to click on the download button because it's sort of convincing you to do this. And once you've executed, that's it. You already have been exploited. I can see it here. It says Aditya's MacBook. Let's say if I want to take a screenshot of your of your webcam, right?
Okay.
So I have a special command here for essentially accessing your little camera right here. If I say execute, there we go.
I just saw a green light pop up there. For a second.
For a second, but now it's already too late. Now I already know what's going on around you.
Oh, wow.
There we go. This particular attack, it recorded the picture, but you can actually record the video. You can also record sound if you wanted to.
That's really disturbing.
You can execute things on the behalf. So what I'm going to try to do is actually open the calculator application.
Okay.
Here we go.
There's my calculator. It just popped up.
I can basically execute any types of commands I want.
Yeah, you get the idea. And so how do you protect yourself against this? So I'll walk you through something that should hopefully stand you in good stead when you're looking at a domain. So this is how a domain name looks like, and those from the IT field will know this extremely well. But the thing which you need to look for, and where people tend to get lost, is when you look at a URL like this. If you see the I don't know if you can see this, the red pointer. People look at this Amazon.com and kind of are okay, but you shouldn't actually be looking at what it starts with. You need to see what it ends with at this point. So the way to look for first is you need to make sure that you get a lock there on the URL. Look for this S here to make sure that it's actually secure. Then skip past this initial thing and then go and look for this this second slash here, right? I think this is the one which kind of determines where you start looking, and then look for the two words before that. Not the ones here, not anything else, the two words just before this last slash. And that is the real domain name. So now if you apply that to this, you will see that if you start reading, it looks like Amazon.com, but it's actually something called B1299.com. And it's actually trying to spoof, a domain name as though it is belonging to Amazon. And people who don't pay attention can actually think this is Amazon link and click and so on. So as long as you follow this thing, you're generally in good shape. whether it is for emails or typing in websites, clicking a link on a page, just look for this. So this second slash here, or the third, if you count these first two, and then the two words before that, and that's what will save you. In fact, if I summarize these things, if you look for passwords, use a password manager, use passphrases which are much longer where possible, and try and avoid using the same password all these places. For email, set up two-factor authentication, watch out for phishing emails, and have a backup email. For payments and banks, protect PIN, OTP, and CVV, and verify that the site is trustable before you make a payment on them. The actual payment itself is generally quite robust. And in general, understand how domain names and URLs are made. Like I just explained to you, go to the second slash and take two words before that. Type URLs instead of searching for them and clicking in a search result, because that way you're particularly sure of what you're getting to. For the ones which are more critical, like a bank, and this whole thing about backing up and so on. And if you do this, you would be more safer than I would say 95% of the world's population. People who are online, they do such simple mistakes and fall prey to all kinds of problems because of that. So if you just follow these few things, you would be much more safer than most of the people. So coming to conclusion, I'm just urging you to follow the simple steps and you'll be quite safe. And I have these links here for both all the three. The Firefox Monitor, where you can monitor alerts or set up alerts for data breaches and see where your email ID has already been used or where your passwords have already been exposed. Bitwarden for managing passwords. You could choose some other tool. This is just the one I'm using. And then Authy for the second factor. Just a disclaimer, I'm not associated with any of these. These are just things that I use myself. And I think it would help everybody as well. So thank you, and thanks for listening to me patiently. Sudheesh, Pradeep, back to you.
Thank you, sir. It was really wonderful and very, very important points what we discussed. It is the need of the hour. So we'll be entering a QA session.
Sure.
Maybe many will have a lot of doubts.
Sure. I'd be glad to answer all of them.
So please unmute and you can ask the questions directly.
Okay, this is Shashidhar here.
Yes, Professor Shashidhar.
Yeah, I have a current account of my company with Axis Bank. And in spite of repeated requests for some sort of access to online payments from my invoices, they say current accounts online payment is not possible. So I end up making customers pay to my account or my mobile, and then I transfer to the official company account. Is it correct?
No, that's actually not true. Current accounts definitely do have a need for online, and we do use it. So in our company and pretty much everybody else, for not just now, for the last maybe 10 years or so, they have been available. So
and why is it they're telling me, Axis Bank is telling me current accounts, no URL, no UPI?
UPI payment. So it could be just the Axis Bank's limitation, but you're talking about UPI or in general online payments?
UPI payments.
Okay, UPI.
I want a barcode. I want a 3D barcode.
Right. Now it could be just Axis Bank policy. I'm sure other banks would be happy to give you an account for that. There's one criteria you might need to know, because you can actually transfer money out of that account. In case you have some rules like you need to at least have 2 people signing a check and so on, then obviously that wouldn't work in the UPI context. So that's probably the one reason why they may be not allowing you that. So if it is a single,
I operate that online. I do online transfers and all that regularly, but receiving payments UPI, they say not possible.
You should definitely follow it up with them. I'm sure they should be it should be possible.
Arun,
Hello, sir.
Yes, yes, madam.
you said that paraphrases, no? For that, you just put one and the other passwords will be there. So won't that be compromised? How do we ensure it doesn't compromise?
I didn't get your question, ma'am. The passphrase. No, the passphrases are actually just an alternative to the passwords. You still need to use a different one on every single site. Right. The reason is for let's say the most common ones. So let's say a bank account. If you have a password which is let's say 6 or 7 characters, and which hopefully doesn't include your name or 1, 2, 3 or something like that, it's still relatively easily guessable. But if you want to make it secure, you need to at least make it 12, 14 characters. Right, but if you make it 12, 14 characters, then it's very difficult to remember some random collection of characters. So passphrases are generally considered easier to remember. So you get 3 words and a number or something like that. Then it's far easier to remember. It's much longer in length and gives you more security. I think that's the reason why passphrases are better off.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. It's me, Anthony.
Hi, Anthony.
Yes, sir, can you please repeat the password manager, use of password manager, the procedure of using password manager and how to saving?
Right. So there are different password managers. Like I mentioned, the one I use is Bitwarden. The other is called LastPass and 1Password and so on. They all come in as usually multi-platform thing. So you would install it part of your browser. It's a browser plugin. So Chrome or Firefox would contain a plugin. You would also get an app on Android so that you could use passwords on both the devices, your laptop as well as your phone. So every time you start creating a new password, creating a new account on a password, you would actually save it in this particular password manager. And because they are integrating with the browser, next time you try to log in, the browser will automatically be populated. The field will get populated by the password manager, right? So all the different passwords that you have are held there. And whenever you go to that particular site, the password manager will fill up the password in that particular, the password field. So you don't have to type it in manually. This allows you to create different password for every single site. Right now, because you need to remember it, you'll end up using the same password for dozens of different sites because you can't remember hundreds of different passwords. So by keeping a different password for each site, now the password manager will remember, and you don't need to know which particular password is for that particular site. That's how it works.
Thank you, sir. The session was really excellent one. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Yeah, Arun, looks like there are some chats on the, on the questions on the chat. Please answer them.
Dr. Venkat's
Yeah, I will help him. There is an add-on to the question last asked, whether this password manager works across all the devices, mobile, laptop, and etc.
It does. All of them generally come in multi-platform support. And like the one which I'm using, Bitwarden, that is present on laptops, Windows, Mac OS, as well as iOS and Android. So even if you have multiple devices, you could use the same password manager, and it will actually synchronize between all those devices. So even if if you created a password on a laptop, you can still access it on your Android or iPhone device as well.
Dr. Venkat's father has a question, whether the QR codes are safe, does using in mobile to detect QR code.
Right, that's an interesting question. Using a QR code to make a payment is actually quite safe. There is really nothing problematic about that. In most cases, when you're making a payment, you would be using a payment app like a Google Pay or a Phone Pay or a Paytm or something and scanning the QR using that. So when you do that, so the QR needs to have certain types of information within that QR, and unless that app gets all that piece of information, you wouldn't really be allowed to make a payment. The only thing you need to watch out is when you scan the QR, it shows you the merchant name as at the payment screen where you type in the amount and so on. And you just need to verify that the name that appears there is the name of the merchant. The easiest way is to say, is this the name you want to make a payment? If that's okay, then it's perfectly okay to make a payment using QR. There's no security risk in that.
Thank you, sir.
So what you're saying? So what you're saying is that once you download the password manager from let's say Play Store, that works on your mobile as well as on your laptop and desktop, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Vasant Chandra sir had something for you to re-explain. Sir, can you please request the question again?
Yes, you mentioned about the OTI, the two-factor
authentication.
Two-factor authentication. I didn't really get that one, OTI matter.
Right. So on Google, on Gmail, and many other email services, and in fact, many other accounts as well, you can set up something called a two-way authentication or a two-factor authentication. Once you go there, in settings, you need to enable that. It'll ask you, how do you want to provide a second factor? The way to think is the first factor is your password. So you enter your email, and your first factor password is your first factor is your password itself, and then introduce an additional thing that is the second factor, right? So this OTI is an app which sits on again Windows and Android and so on. There are many other alternatives as well. This is a free one and which works very well. When you set up the second factor authentication on Gmail, it actually shows you a QR code as part of the setup process. And in the OTI, there is an option to scan that QR code. Okay, so let me show you. Maybe a quick demo might be
please.
A useful thing. So let me share a screen. And, so I'm actually going to use a real account that I have. Is my screen visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
So let me go to, so this is a real email ID that I use, and I will show you. So I have OTI opened up here. So I'm trying to log into this. This is a Zoho mail I use for our Rotary Club, in fact. And so I'm entering my email ID. And then, in fact, if you see that this is Bitwarden here on the, it shows a 1 there, which means that it has one password for this particular site. So it's already filled up that. So I sign in. So usually at this point, you would log into the website and see your emails and so on, right? So here, it asks for something called a time-based ODP, which is really the second factor authentication. And I have that OTI running here. And it says, 021, it keeps changing. You'll see that in 10 seconds, if you see that in 8, 7, it's going to change and come with a new number. Right. So this is a dynamic thing. So it's not like it is a fixed value. And so you need to pick that number at that time and type it in. So 624580, and you need to enter, and then it validates that the number is correct and lets you in. And this number changes every 30 seconds, right? So it's not like someone can take this number and enter it tomorrow or later on. It keeps changing every 30 seconds. So unless you have that particular app installed and where you can pick up that value and enter it, it won't let you log in. So that makes it, so when someone gets your password, they can't do anything with it.
Okay.
All right, that's second factor.
Okay, got it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Nahas has got some questions in chat.
I have one question.
Yeah, please.
Arun, with your that password manager, I got to understand something. But suppose if we are having a shared system in office, like I have a 3 system, and there are 4 people using any system anytime. So suppose I have an internet banking password, and with the password manager, the password gets filled automatically if someone else is also using it.
No, so that's a good question. So password manager actually has a password of its own, right? So which is you need to remember that one big password. So in my case, it's actually a 21-digit password I have for the password manager, right? So in order for the password manager to become active, you need to give that big password, right? So the way it works is you don't share that password. That's the master password to anybody else. And even if it is installed, even if the password manager is installed on those systems, you still cannot have anybody else use it because that master password is not with them. So when you are logging into an account, you can enter that master password, and then all the other passwords get unlocked. And it has a configuration where every time you close the browser, it will ask for the master password again. So you finish whatever you're trying to do, you close your browser, and the master password's effect is gone. Next time someone else launches the browser, it will ask you for the master password again, and hence others don't need to use it.
Yeah, but again, if I'm using say 10 different apps, like say Gmail, CRM, you are using Zoho, so we also use some other CRM, and maybe internet banking.
Yeah.
So if say three guys are using, they also want to use Gmail and say Zoho, but they don't. I don't want them to use say online SBI, SBIonline.com. Then how does it work?
Right. So no, that makes it tricky. Basically, shared systems are always a bit of a problem because you're, and depends on what level of access you want to give. One of the safe ways to do that, relatively safe ways, I would say, is to create different accounts on your PC for different users. Right?
Okay.
So PC users also can be different, right?
Yeah.
So,
True.
and when you log in as a different user on the PC, you get basically different browser profile. And in your browser profile, you have the password manager installed. On the other users, you don't have it installed. So they can choose to do different. In fact, if they have the same password manager installed, they can use a different password, and they can manage their own credentials on that site, while on your PC account, only yours are there. So I think that would be the safest way to manage that.
Okay. Thank you.
Don't just use one single common login for everybody.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Sir?
Yeah, Sharon, very wonderful and informative session. You were concerned about the time. You started on time and ended perfectly on time. That shows your professionalism. My question is again on the password manager, because we are going to store a lot of information on our credit card, banking details and all of the passwords, whole lot of passwords. So does this open source password manager also come with this 2FA, two-factor authentication?
Right. So I think there's one important thing about password managers. The ones I mentioned at least, which make them slightly different than the usual, the systems which require 2FA. First, the password managers do not store any information on their host servers. Right? The information is completely resident on your own laptop or your own device. So it's they use what is basically they synchronize between your laptop and your phone or other devices without the information actually getting stored on any server anywhere. If the information doesn't exist on any server, then the chance of that getting hacked doesn't exist anyway. Right. So because the information is completely on your own personal devices, in some sense, it's physically protected by you. There's no chance of hacking of that itself, and hence you don't need a 2FA for the password manager itself. So just a long and a complex master password should be good enough for that.
So in case the PC gets formatted or by
so
chance.
Right. So I mean, those risks exist. So essentially, you would, for a safe use, and I was mentioning somewhere a backup. I think that's a broad thing. Essentially, you use the password manager on two devices. If you just use it on one device, then you can still obviously manage it. What you would need to do then go is at least a few critical passwords you need to definitely remember. One would be your email, certainly, because then you can go and ask for a password reset for all your accounts and at least get hold of that. So there's some passwords which are critical, which you shouldn't definitely just leave it to the password manager, but you should remember yourself. Set up complex password, but remember it, and leave all other passwords to the password manager.
Thank you.
Yeah, Arun, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Assume, I do have a many email address across many apps. Can I have one Bitwarden account across many, having my personal email address, my work email address, and other email address? I think this was asked in the previous question, but I quite didn't understand the answer probably.
No, you can definitely have it. I use a whole lot of email IDs. I probably have some 7 or 8 email IDs for a variety of things, and they all are managed under one Bitwarden actually. So they're definitely doable.
Okay, and if I'm going for cognito mode when I'm browsing, does the Bitwarden still work or it doesn't?
In general, it's not supposed to work. There are ways to make it work, but by default it doesn't work. But Bitwarden actually has an option where you can go to the normal the normal mode of the browser and type in the domain name there, fetch the password, of course after unlocking with the master password, and you can copy and paste that into the incognito mode window.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Any more questions?
I think we need a special session on your password manager one more time.
Yeah, looks like that. Yeah.
So much to digest.
That's good.
Okay, better directly go to Arun and ask and clarify, and I'll ask him only to manage all.
No. Just go to bitwarden.com. You'll get everything there. So
We saw some of your passwords today, so you need to change your password first.
no, I'm perfectly safe because they're all protected with second factor. And as you saw, there are 10 passwords which were breached and people got access to from different sites, including LinkedIn and Dropbox and other things. So I'm still not too worried about it because those are not used, and all of the critical ones I have second factor.
One word, Arun.
Hi.
It's a very wonderful and enlightening session. Of course, we are in a present world. We are using this digital. We are in the present world digitalization. And we must be very cautious in handling and entering into this digital world, I would say. Because I am working in a court, we are handling many cases regarding that, this phishing and hacking, because the hackers are more updated than we are us. So we should be very much cautious in that handling all these things. So you have put some light to that, enlightened us, all the members of Mastermind. Thank you on behalf of our Mastermind members. And it's a very enlightening session. Do come and share the knowledge with us.
Thank you, madam. It was a pleasure. Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Arun, I have a question. Actually, micropayments, on micropayments, your company is working.
Right.
And we see countries like China has already moved in very much in that. With phone, I have seen people paying in small establishments. So what is the challenge you see in India? As diverse, it's a very diverse country.
Yeah.
So how do you think you can really push this? And
I think it's happening. It's just a matter of time. I don't think there's anything fundamentally stopping us. In fact, as you would have been seeing, UPI in particular has taken off extremely well. Right now, about 1.8 billion transactions a month happen. That's huge, right? That's huge. That's more than 1.5 transactions per citizen of the country, right? So it's a big number of transactions that happen. There's still some way to go, of course, before we reach China's level. A lot of that is to do with our comfort in the things we are talking about today, the trust and belief in smartphone-based payment systems. People are getting to it in urban areas. I think the youth, it's extremely common. As we go a little bit beyond the urban areas, or we go a little up in age, the comfort reduces and there's a little bit more uncertainty. So as we get used to those things, I'm sure it will take up. There are a few other areas where we tend to use cash, the really small payments. Some of it is cultural reasons, where merchants actually prefer to not have digital payments. So those are things which will take a little longer to get past. But I don't think there's anything fundamentally that will hold us back from reaching same levels of adoption.
So I think you have given a very good session, and it is very relevant. All the points which are discussed is relevant for every member, because we are going to a completely digitalized era in future. So it was certainly an awesome program.
Thank you.
I would like to hear 2 words from our Taman sir. He is the actual mastermind behind the scene.
Nothing like that. See, I mean, I was wondering, I started my journey with computer business in 1994 where all this, I don't know, like antivirus and all. Now it is totally gone to a different area where I don't have passwords for anything. In fact, that is what I was wondering. My debit card, credit card is, yeah, everything has got same password, which everybody knows also. But I am so happy that there is no money in the account so that they cannot do anything with that. But then, I was just wondering how much susceptible we are to. Like, you know, I remember, what's his name? He's the Rishiraj Singh. Rishiraj Singh, yeah. He's an IPS officer who is in charge of so many things. Very, very powerful. He had come here once and he told, at least your mobile should have a, what is it, pattern or fingerprint.
Yeah.
But then, as he said, you know, rightly, when we go for ease, it has got danger also.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is a trade-off which we will have to take. I really understand how much I should be, rather what I am. Thank you so much for that awesome presentation. And I am indeed very happy that today Pradeep sir had called me in the evening and said, we'll have to start on time. Like, you know, and it happened. It started exactly on time. Thank you. There's a good crowd, and thanks everyone who came. And as said, Mastermind keeps on having so many programs. Yesterday there was a story by a girl, a lady who drove in her bike from Kerala to Himalayas, like Manali, Kulu Manali, Kartunga Pass, and then go to southernmost, and then came back 11,400 kilometers all alone. So there are, we try to bring in so many talks. So please be a member of this group, whoever wishes, whoever is not added, and also suggest people. This is a very open group. Like we have the open source, which has got no financial commitments. It's nothing commercial. It's all mutual benefit. So please come in. And then thanks to Tamre ma'am for referring Arun. And then, you know, it was awesome. Great. Good day. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing that unbreakable technique. Keep all the credit cards, debit cards open, and keep your money in a separate account and not connected to internet.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount he is having. That's why this technique he is applying.
That is the great two-factor authentication.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
So I would like to invite Bharatdas sir for a formal vote of thanks.
Moderator Pradeep and opening batsman Sudhish and our Thuman. It's a great honor to have a speaker like this, Rotarian Arun Tankashi. And it is a great honor to have a presentation on security affairs. Tonight is not another night. It was a star-studded night with a lot of information on security, knowledge and whatnot. And today we got an insight onto some technical background of the security payment system, a system which we were all worried about. And sometimes, you know, we let loose our accounts like emails and other things. Now we know how to secure all the things. Some of the information we got within the last 1 hour is on the password manager. There's a new thing we all got about the Firefox monitor. There is also another information we all would like to be sharing with others. And the OT and the two-factor authentication is something we were missing. You also spoke about the phishing attacks, and then the SIM swap is the most dangerous thing. The SIM swap happens. We were happy wherever we go. No, we get a free Wi-Fi. We always log into free Wi-Fi. Now you said that free Wi-Fi is not that much safe. Now we should be securing on that. So on the four things: the passwords, the payments, emails, and general whatnot. You did a lot of investigation and presented us what is known as the integrity, availability, and confidentiality of our systems. From the bottom of our heart, let me thank you for being with us. I should thank Tamara ma'am for bringing up such a wonderful personality. You are so simple, you are so pleasant, and then you are technical. Even though it was so technical, we didn't feel like that. It was crafted to a common man's knowledge, and then you served it in a beautiful delicacy. Thank you everyone for the nice presentation, beautiful language, and then a lot of content in the shortest possible time. Something we will ever remember. And our thanks are also due to Rotarians in 3190, because I am also part of a Rotary Club. Rashmi, Vasant, Venkat, and Shashidharan and Udan. All those guests who has come from Bangalore. It was all possible because Tamara ma'am invited them. And be a part of the mastermind. 9 o'clock every 9 o'clock you can come and log in. Venkat, we had a session on ophthalmology, so we again remember him and invite him again and again. So my thanks are also due to all the people who have come here, especially Pradeep, Nahar, Somaji, Manoj, Sudesh, Manu, Hari, and Manikandan, who are the pillars of Mastermind, and Anthony Joy, very famous trainer. And thank you all for being with us tonight. And let me wish you a good night and good sleep. Bye and good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
So before closing, Arun sir, Dr. Venkit came here for a session, and now he is our family member. So that's our culture.
Yep.
So, expecting that you also will become part of our family.
Certainly.
So that, we can easily access you and ask any doubts or any clarification. And to be frank, we have a session every day at 9 o'clock, and the link is same, except on certain cases there will be separate ID, but in most of the cases the link is same. Which we have used to connect today. So all the participants are always welcome to join evening at 9 o'clock and be with this family.
You can click on the link there down in the chat box, and you get added to the mastermind group, WhatsApp group, so that everything will be posted there. Okay. Thank you so much all, and good night.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks.
And all Arun's friends also. A lot of Arun's friends are there, I believe. Thank you, all the Rotarians also.
Yeah, thank you, Selvi. You're already part of our family.
Arun sir, there are a lot of good feedback, and it's very
Thank you. Thanks for that.
I don't know. I cannot read the whole thing.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye.
That's why he is having Rashmi.
Yeah, bye, ma'am. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye. Good night.